Joining us right now on the economy, big tech, and much more is Economic Security Project co-chair Chris Hughes, who is also the co-founder of Facebook. His new piece in the American Prospect, Rule by Deal, is a criticism of the Trump administration's industrial and tariff policies. And Chris, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with the piece first. The way you've laid this out, you make a lot of pretty deep and important points. You're looking at the deals that the Trump administration has cut when it comes to semiconductors, when it comes to rare earths, but when it comes to lots of other things, too. And your point is that this is not new economic nationalism and it's not state capitalism. What do you think it is?
Yeah, exactly. I think we got to take a step back. This is rule by deal, and it's not going very well, and I'll tell you why. So a lot of people are trying to figure out what all these private deals are. 2 weeks ago, it's nuclear power. Before that, it was MP Materials. Before that, it was Intel, NVIDIA. We know the sequence of them. And people are trying to figure out, is it economic nationalism? Is it industrial policy? Greg Ip in the Wall Street Journal calls it state capitalism. And I see something a lot more basic. I see a group of deal makers, the president himself, but also the Commerce Secretary and the Treasury Secretary, going one by one, picking winners and losers. And that is exactly the criticism that so many leveled at the Biden administration. And what's actually happening here is that there are particular companies that can find their way to the White House, they find their way through the negotiations, and then they can get really meaningful public investment, and the private capital crowds in without any thorough consideration of competitors, the industrial landscape, no transparency, and so far, very little accountability to follow up on it. So this is exactly how one doesn't want to do.
Yeah, I see your point when it comes to picking winners and losers and doing a deal-by-deal basis. I'm not a huge fan of that. But I will say there are some arenas that the Trump administration has pushed into that could require a government intervention because these are national security issues.
Absolutely.
Specifically, if you look at rare earths, if you look at semiconductors, if you look at a lot of these areas, we're in a much more complicated position because of the dominance that China has in some of those areas, whether it's rare earths and they say we're not going to sell them to you anymore after they drove us out of the business from a capitalistic point of view 20 years ago, to what happens if they decide to try and take over Taiwan and the semiconductor business there.
Yeah, and I think that's why we have to get this right. So the point I'm making in the piece isn't that industrial policy is bad in and of itself. It's rather that we need to have a comprehensive institutional approach. So we'll take critical minerals because I'm 100% with you. We have got to use the public sector to get those industries moving. So we need a clear mission. Are we producing the critical minerals in the United States? Are we okay doing that with our partners and friends like Canada and elsewhere? Australia. Then we need an institutional capacity who's charged with putting that mission into place. I think the Development Finance Corporation, which is actually a Trump one invention, would be a great place to put it. And then we need a process to say, hey, if you are either mining, extracting, or doing any kind of innovative work around these minerals, you need to come to the government and say you're doing it, and we will invest in you. We have the template for this with the CHIPS program. $40 billion was put forward.
Don't love the CHIPS program
then we
either.
had 5 of the largest semiconductor manufacturers in the world open up fabs, and we did it in a thorough and fair way.
We did it in a thorough and fair and really slow way, and that's part of the problem with this. In fact, we had Intel's former CEO, who was just with us a couple of weeks ago, who said it was years that they were waiting for the Commerce Department under the Biden administration to hand out those funds, and in the meantime, things collapse. With something like rare earths, it's probably going to take us 5 to 7 years, even if we start today, to be in a position where we are not reliant on China.
Yeah, well, I mean, the CHIPS package was passed in the summer of 2021, and then by the end of the Biden administration, $34 billion had been committed. So that's 3 years. I'm with you. It should have been half that. Totally. Agreed. But the only way to do that is to work with to give an institution a clear mission and then work with Congress to streamline that rather than just doing one deal here or there because your buddy called you up and you know somebody. And so here's $80 billion for Westinghouse, or here's a suspension of export controls for NVIDIA, or, we're going to take this one equity stake in Intel because we had a special conversation. There's no coherency. And I think that runs the risk of enriching certain private market actors and misallocating, private capital, which is the big fear that so many have had about industrial policy for so long.
Can I ask a separate question? OpenAI recently put out a statement around the way the government should think about potentially investing in data centers in the country.
Yeah.
And they effectively were trying to argue to some degree that, it shouldn't be a situation where the government's spending money and then private sector's on top of it, but it was sort of hard to understand exactly where they were going with this. But long term, do you see the government playing a big role in data centers?
Yeah, I saw the news that you're talking about. I thought that was pretty rich, particularly coming a few days after this accidental disclosure of a desire for a government backstop for OpenAI. I mean, there is so much private capital moving into not just OpenAI, but the AI ecosystem. I mean, the CapEx numbers are, you guys talk about them all the time, well, pushing close to $500 billion this year. When you see an industry with that much private capital rushing in, that's the exact moment where public capital should lean back. We don't need any additional funds. If anything, I worry about a bubble in that space with so much money. So, I mean, the government should be monitoring that, thinking about that, analyzing its implications on national security concerns. But if I, had the magic wand around what industrial policy to pursue, I'd be thinking a lot more about things like critical minerals than I would AI.
And then separately on tariffs, I was talking to a CEO of a automobile maker, U.S. automobile maker recently. And they were basically making the argument that 10 years from now, we will just have a domestic car market, given the way, and that parts of the rest of the market will be this way as well, where we will have cars that cost more money, that are less competitive, that don't have the same features that you can get in China or elsewhere. And whether you think that that's a good thing, a feature, a bug.
It's a bug.
And if it's a bug, therefore, what should happen? Because the truth is, and you've heard Elon Musk make this comment, if we didn't have tariffs on automobiles, it is not clear we would have an automobile industry at all in this country. And whether we should just say we want to be a services industry, and that's cool too. I don't know the answer.
Yeah. Listen, I think tariffs can be used tactically to accomplish certain public policy goals. But the kinds of tariffs that I don't think make any sense are these kind of sweeping tariffs across all imports or across all kinds of industries. It's automobiles, avocados, Rolex watches, you name it. Everything is tariffed. I think that's a bad thing for trade. I think that'll lower economic growth and makes little sense. I can see, the Trump administration early on believed that making domestic automobiles was important, and so worked that into the renegotiation of NAFTA. Biden did something similar with electronic vehicles from China, putting targeted tariffs on those. I think those kinds of policies can at times make sense, but the idea of tariffing so aggressively and so across the board that the entirety of automobile production would be domestic rather than international, I think would be a bad thing for consumers. And people are tired of paying higher and higher prices, and the tariffs are only accelerating the price hikes. And I think that is going to increasingly become a problem for this administration and for the Republicans in Congress.